0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can also text 84850 and tweet at LBC with your opinion. And let's get an opinion on this latest news of the fines with Chris Daw QC, author of Justice on Trial. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Clive.
So what do you make of this latest measure then?
Well, it's a symptom of a Prime Minister and a government out of control. If you have control of something, you don't need to start policing and fining members of the public huge amounts of money. If this was a good idea, it was a good idea 3, 4 or 5 months ago. And the truth is, it wasn't a good idea then, and it's not a good idea now. It's just a signal that the government has lost control of this virus, and they're now trying to penalise members of the public because they can't control it themselves.
But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that people are just not heeding the advice. They're being told to self-isolate, they're being told to quarantine, and they're not doing it. Would this not persuade them, one way or the other, to follow the law now that it is the law or will be?
Well, my experience of 26 years of the justice system is that the more that you penalise people and the more you threaten them, the more you alienate them from a process which should actually be inclusive. The problem we have is that this government from day one has failed to communicate to the public in a way that has persuaded the public. People have lost confidence in the government. They don't understand the message. They don't understand the reasons why decisions are being made. And that's the reason people break the law. And bringing in fines, particularly very large fines, will not act as a deterrent to anyone. What they actually need to do is make decisions that are right. For example, they need to reintroduce the shielding programme, because it's the most vulnerable 1.5 million in our society who are truly at risk from this virus. And at the moment, we've heard nothing about the shielding programme, and instead they're talking about fining probably thousands or tens of thousands of people who present very little risk to themselves or others, rather than protecting those in real harm in care homes, the elderly, and those with underlying health conditions.
What about the process? Can Boris Johnson just say, right, this is going to be law?
No, it has to be issued as a regulation by the Secretary of State. Parliament has, in fact, provided wide-ranging powers to the government to make these regulations up as they go along. And that's one of my other concerns. MPs don't scrutinise these changes. At the moment, we have government by the Prime Minister and by ministers with very little control from Parliament. And when you're talking about restricting the movement of members of the public, ripping up people's rights to go about their business as they choose, you must have very serious consideration by Parliament before these changes take place. And many of these regulations are just made up on the hoof in response to the latest news headlines and the latest statistics, and that's not how you make good law.
Do you think there would be many actual prosecutions for this offence, or is it something to make headlines and kind of slightly scare people?
It's definitely something to make headlines. I suspect there'll be actually very few prosecutions in the sense of people being taken to court. There will be notices issued by the police to a smaller number of people, or to a larger number of people, I should say. But I think you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. This isn't actually making law that you want to use and enforce. It's making law as headlines. And that's not what law is for. Law is supposed to be taken seriously, supposed to be given careful thought. And in normal times, you would not bring in laws that could result in people being taken to court and prosecuted without Parliament having a proper look at it and asking, why do we need this law? What's going wrong in the first place? Why is the virus spreading and why are cases rising? And that it's not because people haven't been fined enough. It's because people have not been given clear messaging from the start, and because those who are at most risk have not been protected. Look at the care home scandal. Look at the absolute tragedy that's happened in the care home sector, and the government is still doing nothing about that. They're still doing nothing about those people who are at the highest risk. And instead, they just go for headlines time and again. And it's a symptom of a government that's lost control.
But I guess what they would say is, well, we have been clear about self-isolating. That advice has been there from the start, and people are now not doing it. And they're spreading the virus, and that's the problem. That's why the cases are going higher and higher.
But the virus was always going to spread and go higher and higher. That's the nature of this virus. The only way that they got the virus to stop spreading was by locking down the whole of society. But we can't have an indefinite lockdown of the whole of society. We just can't afford that as a nation. The consequential problems in terms of health, in terms of the economy, and in terms of the welfare of the people are just far too great to have an extended further period of lockdown. So what you need to do is protect the most vulnerable and persuade the hearts and minds of the public as to the wisdom of social distancing and the wisdom of isolation. It's only if the public believe the message and buy into the message that people will stick to the rules. They won't stick to the rules simply because you threaten them with a big stick. That doesn't work in any area of the criminal law or any other area of the justice system. Just threatening people and telling people off is not the way to conduct public policy on something as serious as this.
Well, we don't know the full details of this yet. It's all a bit sketchy, to be honest. Not the first time something comes out sort of on a Saturday evening, but it is being said that there will be carrot and stick. So in some ways there'll be the threat of huge fines, but also they're going to try and put more help in to persuade people where you won't have to lose out by giving up work. And I think that's why some people are not self-isolating. They simply can't afford to. Do you think that might make a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference. What they've announced is, I think the regulation that's being announced is relatively clear in that sense, that they're going to give £500 payments to those on lower incomes and those on benefits, as it were, as an incentive not to break quarantine and not to break self-isolation and go to work. But that really is a drop in the bucket to most people. With the cost of living, the cost of rents, the cost of food, £500 is nothing. What they actually need to do is get the economy operational, back to work, stop treating people like children, and do what you do when an illness affects one group disproportionately and protect that group. Protect the vulnerable group, give them extra resources, give them extra support, not penalise the rest of society, because we just cannot afford an indefinite lockdown.
Well, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Chris Daw QC there, author of Justice on Trial, reacting to this news that we've heard this evening. It's going to be made illegal to refuse to self-isolate. If you're caught doing it out and about and you should have been self-isolating, you will be fined. And if you repeat it, you'll be fined more and more and more, up to £10,000. I wonder whether you're in favour of that idea. Will it make any difference? Are there other ideas that Boris Johnson should be looking at to flatten the curve, as he said before? What do you think of what Chris was saying there about bringing back shielding? Rather than the full national lockdown or even lots of local lockdowns, target the help and target the restrictions to those most likely to be affected and bring back shielding. What do you think? 0345 6060 973. More in a moment. This is LBC.